All right, so today I am joined by Philippa, and we're going to have a conversation about feeling your emotions. But before we begin, I want actually to allow Philippa to introduce herself and talk a little bit about her work. So take it away, girl.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So my name is Philippa Wilkins, and I am a coach, and I also facilitate a breathwork therapy or process called Transformational Breath. And I'm actually, before I got into this current field of work, I was a corporate escapee. So I worked in the insurance industry in London for about 12 years. And through that time, started waking up, I guess, to my life, and maybe that it wasn't kind of what I wanted to do with my life, until I came to kind of a crunch point when many things changed. And part of that process was finding my new career as a transformational breath facilitator. And that journey also led me to a lot of travel and living in Brazil and various other places, and now finding myself back in London. So the work that I do is called Transformational Breath. And it's really using our breath to process some of the things that are holding us back in our life on a physical level. So really gain well-being from opening up and using our full diaphragmatic breathing capacity that we have to breathe fully and deeply. And through that process, release some of the emotional and mental stories, the emotional energy that we might be carrying from the past, that again might be restricting our full expression in life. And really ultimately gaining a deeper connection and true self-knowledge and understanding of who we are. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I do. So thank you for having me today, Kerri-Ann.
Yeah, and I came across your work and actually you about 6 months ago here in Brazil. And just in my journey, have participated in 2 sessions of yours, both a private and a group session, and just love, for me, just love the expression of energy that came out of me during the session. That was super surprising, and it was what my body needed in that moment. And actually, I just want to share a story. When I first met Philippa and we first connected, and she did, and we were going to do an exchange of I providing Reiki for you, and then you doing the breath work. But I had this like abscess. Do you remember?
Yeah.
On my gum, and it was kind of growing. And then we did the breath work that day, and a lot of energy was coming out, and it was really intense. It was really good. And then I returned home, and within an hour, the abscess burst. I've never had an abscess burst. I've only ever had an abscess one other time in my life. I never had it burst and was bleeding, and like I'm talking to a dentist, and they're like, everything's okay. You're going to be fine. Just keep it clean. But it was so amazing because I just did that session with you, and the energy was moving throughout my body, and my body was saying, this is what needs to happen. And then it just like, it burst and started its healing process. So it can be as magnificent as that.
It can be.
Yes.
Well, it can be very gentle. It's just...
Yes, it can be. I think it always depends. I'm sure you could probably talk about this a little bit in the work that you do with people, you know, based on the experience you had, but it depends maybe where people are in their journey of consciousness. So when you, like for me, I'm so tapped into myself and my feelings and my body because I've been on this path for a long time now that, you know, I feel like my body will give a lot more because I'm ready for it. Where someone that is just starting this journey and it's still very scary, and they don't have this mind-body connection that's really strong. They're so disconnected kind of from the head to the body, that they may not feel that sensation. The body might not be ready to express that much energy yet.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the great things I find about the work, and I like to describe it as like therapy without the need to talk. Because what happens is we access an altered state of consciousness, which helps us reconfigure, I guess, the subconscious mind and allow some things that maybe are stuck in there to come out and be integrated, so that they're not kind of hanging around in the background messing with the program, you know, because ultimately I view humans as kind of complex complex machines with a lot of programming in the background, and some of that programming is not serving us. So we can get in with the body as a vehicle, using the breath to reprogram some of our ways of thinking, some of our old patterns, loops, and behaviors, right? So as you say, depending on where you're at in yourself, breathwork provides you with the answer you need right in the here and now. Mm-hmm. So for some people, it might actually be a very physical, intense physical experience where they really viscerally feel their body. They become very, very aware of their body. And that might actually be as a result of being really disconnected and disassociated with their body for a long time. And it can be quite surprising for people, like, wow, you know, just with breathing, I get these sensations and this energy and this tingly fingers and all of these things. Whereas for other people, it might be more of an emotional experience. You know, there might be things from childhood that pop into your awareness for integration and resolution. Or it may be a very floaty and relaxing journey where you're connecting with yourself. Equally, it could be getting stuck in the mind and the thoughts are going round and I'm not doing this correctly, and how do I, you know, how am I breathing okay? And so like you say, it kind of meets you where you're at and takes you to the next level for what you specifically need. And transformational breath itself is a self-empowering technique. You know, it's a tool for somebody to go away and use. I don't want to be a healer to the world. I believe that breath is the healer, and we all have this capacity to breathe. It just so happens that I'm trained and qualified to assist people in learning this technique and facilitating that process. But ultimately, we can use it as much or as little as we want, but it's going to give us the insight that we need at the level that we're at, which I think is essentially what.
And it's, you know, it's a similar and yet different modality to like Reiki. Reiki will serve you where you're at, and sometimes it's an emotional release. Sometimes it is just very calm and just relaxing. Like I call it an energy massage. So even when you do massage, sometimes your massage, you're like, wow, it really hurts today, but you're releasing whatever toxins, and sometimes it's super relaxing. So it depends on what your body is ready to let go of. And also, as you talked about, sometimes you get into your mind, and so the mind also controls the body, so sometimes you don't allow it. So every journey
that's for the control freaks out there. They're in the mind and they're like, what's happening here, and am I doing it right? And it's just the ego kicking in, because the ego knows, I don't want to go near any emotion, I don't know what that is, I don't know how to deal with it, so just leave it down there. We'll just leave it alone down there, and we won't have to deal with that.
And speaking of emotion, that's what we're talking about today. And just to preface this, that we actually recorded the conversation on emotion before recording the introduction. So you're going to hear this introduction, and then you're going to hear our conversation about emotions and feelings and being in the body, and more on breath work and the process of navigating through your emotion, and the work that I'm doing in this course. So just be ready for that. It's kind of a long conversation, but it's good.
Yay! All this stuff that we're talking about, just having a conversation about, can
be applied in this. I mean, what I'm trying to accomplish with the course is about just the basics of understanding, like, emotion is, okay, I define emotion and feelings very separate. So emotions are the actual sensations your body makes. So when you're hungry, your body will often make the sensation of a kind of a grumbling stomach. You kind of feel something in your stomach. You might feel weak. You might feel lightheaded. And it signals you to the feeling of, I feel hungry. Because emotion is energy in motion. So your body is saying, I need this. I need fuel. I feel thirsty, or you're feeling tired. There's sensations your body makes that identify with, and it's telling you it needs something. But those 5 core emotions that I cover, so for instance, anger, oftentimes it shows up as tightness in the chest, tightness in the upper back, tightness in the jaw when you're really angry and you're like battling it out with someone, how you feel like tight in your jaw or in your throat area. And anger usually identifies with, so on the emotional side of the sensations you feel in the body, and then you identify, I feel angry. And then what does that mean? So anger generally means something is not working. An expectation has been broken that I created. So I'm having what Christine Hassler would call an expectation hangover. An agreement we had was broken and it needs to be addressed, fixed, or removed. And so it's saying, do something. The same with sadness. It's like, feels super heavy in the heart or chest area. It feels almost like, I imagine, like a cloud filled with water, like weighing you down. And you want to cry. Sometimes you just feel this sense of heaviness in your body. That's the sensations, that's the emotion. And then you identify the feeling of sadness. I feel sad. And sadness usually means something wants to be let go of. And it could be a person, a place, a thing. So like yesterday, I was sitting in my hammock and I woke up from a nap and I was in my hammock and thinking about, I'm going to miss this hammock. And then all of a sudden I felt very sad because I need to let go of that space that I have because I'm moving, and just feeling that kind of sadness and being okay with it, just feeling it through my body, letting it go. It's the same thing as like I talk about watching one of the kids on America's Got Talent when they perform and they get the golden buzzer, how they cry. And people say, they're crying tears of joy. They are that too, but they're also crying because there was a belief they had that there was two beliefs they were carrying. One, they could do it, and one, they couldn't do it. And they didn't know if either was going to come true until it happened. And what happened is they did it. So the belief that I couldn't do it needed to be let go of. And so they cry. It's the same thing as when I ran my first 10K. I cried as I crossed the finish line. Why? Because I just proved I did it. I could let go of the belief that there's that chance I couldn't do it, but I could let go of it because I did it. So it's our body's telling us something like this needs to happen. And there's this great mind-body connection, but we oftentimes are so disconnected from it because, again, we were taught as children, many of us, like, no, don't cry over spilt milk, be a tough girl, don't wear your emotions on your sleeve. It's not appropriate to get angry like that. Instead of being taught to go, well, what are you feeling right now? And just feeling it in the body. I mean, you do this work, I think, beautifully in Transformational Breath. You make us like feel, especially in my 2 times experience with you, a lot of anger was coming out of my body. And I felt like the 5-year-old on the ground kicking and screaming and just releasing it out. I mean, I wasn't screaming, maybe in my head, but I was like giving permission. And the first time I did it with you, it felt completely foreign and uncomfortable. It felt wrong because I was told once it was wrong. So the second time that I did it, the second session I did with you, it felt amazing. It felt like my body was being liberated. And this is also Peter Levine's work. He talks about this in somatic healing, of that release the body just needs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we talk about the body all the time, and reality is our body knows what it needs to do, right? And as you say, when I talk about this in breathwork, the body knows what it needs to do to heal, and it's our little mind that gets in the way. So, and all of these all of the conditioning and beliefs and all of the things that we've been brought up with that have limited our ability to express or feel any type of emotion. And I'll just go on to explain that a little bit more. I mean, we've already had this conversation, but just in terms of the work that I do, my belief really is that all emotion is valid. Your experience is valid in any given moment. But we're taught that it's not. So we start disassociating from a very, very early age from our feelings and our emotions and the sensations that are happening in our body. So we actually start disassociating from our body itself.
Exactly.
It's, I don't like this. I feel funny, and I can't do anything to move this energy through me, because as we know, energy is emotion. Emotion is energy. So what do I do with this feeling that's building up? I can't express it. I'm being told to be quiet and be a good kid. And where does this energy go? So it does get stuck. But on top of that, we get told it's bad. So we have a negative association with feeling really anything. other than, oh, I'm okay. And that's, that's my
Mm-hmm.
background of coming to transformational breath work. Is I was numbed out to my emotions for a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have known what an emotion was if it slapped me around the face. My life was kind of like, people would ask me, how are you? I'm like, I'm fine. I know that's the kind of standard Western response, but it's kind of like, yeah, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
When that really was just operating in this kind of numbed out bracket in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
There was no anger, there was no no anger, no sadness, but there was also no joy and no kind of peace and happiness either. It was just this like, grey.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay, I'm beige, I'm operating in there, and it's so limiting. When my personal belief is that the human experience is to be able to, joy for me is about experiencing any kind of emotion, but the key is not getting stuck in any one particular one. And
Exactly.
actually and understanding what the emotion is telling us. As you were saying, I'm angry because, somebody actually just crossed a boundary, and I'm not very happy about that, so I need to take some action.
Yep.
It's like interpreting the message we don't get taught in school.
No, even coming down to the basic feeling of hunger. Like, I think hunger is a little bit more acceptable. You feel, okay, I feel hungry, but we're taught when to eat and how much to eat, and but we're not taught to listen. Like, how often it's 5 o'clock, it's dinner time, or 6 o'clock, whatever your set time is, but maybe you weren't hungry. Maybe you were hungry at 3 and your mom goes, or your dad or your teacher goes, you have to wait till snack time. You have to wait until you're home for dinner. And so we're not, again, listening to ourselves and giving ourselves what we need. And then we're told what we need. And then we use other devices like food for numbing out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And dealing with those emotions. So there's a lot to unpack here. And what I hope, what I want to do in this course is really teach people just the basics of connecting with their body, like feeling this, like, what's the sensation? Where is the sensation? Describe the sensation. To start to listen to the body. It's like listening to a foreign language, like really listening to the language and trying to understand it. And then interpreting that. What does that mean to you? And this feeling that the sensations that I'm feeling feel like sadness, feel like hunger, feel like anger. Okay, then what is that saying? What's the information? Like, what is it that the body, and not just the body, but the mind, what is it that you need to do to move through that and let that emotion be free? And really feel into the sensations, feel into the emotions. So sadness, anger, joy. And I even use sexual, which is really creative energy. I mean, and again, at a young age, or at one point, are taught to stop being creative. Like, you can't sit in the sandbox anymore and just play. I remember even being a child and just being free to play, and literally like an aunt of mine saying, like, you're too old for that. And it was like, and I really got upset about it. But then I was conditioned to believe, okay, I don't do that anymore. You don't color anymore. Actually, it's really interesting. I picked up coloring a couple of years ago. And at first, people really struggled with it. Like, isn't that childish to color? And now it's like so freeing just to color. There's no outcome. It's just coloring. That's it. And I can decide if I want to stay in the lines or not. What colors I want to use.
Exactly. Well, I think we put labels on things. We try to understand things, and we also, when I use the word, I don't even know if it's a word, but adultify things.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a child, you do this thing over here, and if you're an adult, you change your behavior and you do something else. But it's very, very limiting.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have to live in these boxes. This again is conditioning. It's all of the things that maybe your family did, that you learned growing up, that were taught to you as this is how life works. So you take them on as your own.
Yep.
And you take on all of these rules and regulations and opinions that weren't yours in the first place. A bit like when you go to school and you learn the times tables, 2 times 2 is 4. You're learning that by rote most of the time, by repetition. And the same within the family system. we're consuming day in, day out all of this information from the feedback that we're getting in the family system as to how to, how to operate, how to show emotion or not show emotion, how to interact and communicate with other people or not.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things, we come to life when we eventually, grow up and become an adult, and we have all of these, I guess, if you want to look at it as a pair of glasses, and we have all of this dirt, this way of doing things on our glasses, and we look out through those glasses as that's how the world is. Mm-hmm. And that then gives us our expectations on how the world should be, which when they're not met, we get disappointed, we get angry, we get sad, we get, a whole host of emotions about that. I like this phrase, I don't know where it came from, but about expectation. And expectations are resentments under construction.
It's an interesting one. Resentments under construction.
Yeah. So it's kind of like this concept that even before we've got out of the blocks, we have this idea about how somebody should be, what this situation should be like, and when it doesn't materialize in that way, we're disappointed, we're upset, we're resentful, because the picture we had in our mind is not now here. Yep. Right?
No, for
sure. And it creates this kind of rigidity in our mind as well. For me, kind of emotional freedom is also about flexibility, and having the ability, or being able to recognize that this emotion also is passing. I think in one of your videos you were saying about how the lifespan of an emotion is a minute and a half.
Yep.
And often this is what I see in the work that I do when releasing emotional content, as I would describe it, or energy, doesn't have to last a long time. Mm-mm. Actually, it can be very, 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 very quick. But that goes with the flexibility as well. I think when you have the ability to realize that, emotions can pass, and I can feel happy, and then I can feel sad, and then I can feel something else, and then I can feel something else, and I don't have to get stuck in any one thing. I think that's really freeing. So I have an itchy nose. One thing I was going to say, I think this will help kind of dispel a little bit of fear about feeling emotions, right? Because usually when you have a conversation about something deep or something emotional, people will say, "Oh, I'm sorry I got upset," or they don't want to cry, or they don't want to be expressing what is perceived by society as being a negative emotion, which for me don't exist. They're just, higher and lower vibrations. Mm-hmm. We just get told by society that these are unacceptable in public and these ones are okay. But for me, there's kind of a distinction between what's happening now and the emotion that we might feel about a situation. And it could have two causes. It could actually be relevant and in the moment now as a reaction to something that's happening. But it can also be a pattern from the past that's repeating.
Of course.
Right? And I know this from myself. It's something happens, somebody presses a button here, and I react in a particular way. It's like somebody presses the anger button and they go through a loop and it might be, for some people that might be an outburst, for other people it might be the silent treatment, for somebody else it might be going off on a rant and, complaining to friends or family or whatever. Other people it might even be some kind of violence, Usually those patterns are learned in childhood as well. But many of these patterns that have been learned or experienced and lodged in our subconscious at some level are from the past, right?
Oh, of course.
They're from our childhood, they're from our past experiences. So they're like the ghosts of the past visiting us today.
Well, it's, you get triggered. That's what you're talking about, is you get triggered by something and you react to that trigger based again on your childhood and based on how you made meaning to that childhood. I don't think sometimes my parents did say things like, "Oh, don't be angry, be quiet, go in your room and just," but you also make meaning to things that happen based on things that they did at you, towards you, for you, towards each other, that you observe, because you enter into this world, you don't know how it works. And your brain is in a theta brainwave pattern for the first, 7 years of life or so. And you're just downloading. And you're just observing, and you look at your parents or primary caregivers as almost perfect, as like, they know how it works. They're going to keep me in survival. You have no idea how it worked. You came in here in an empty slate. You have some basic instincts, survival instincts, but other than that, you don't know the meanings behind it, and you start to make meaning behind it. And then you run on that pattern. That's your operating system until you become aware and start to wake up and conscious to this work and start to observe yourself, your feelings, your emotions, the sensations. Like, why do I react to a snake? Oh, because my mom reacted to a snake. I learned that. She was scared. I was scared. It's not always that simple, and it's not always, but usually it's something that you did in your childhood that now you repeat and operate on. And as you talked about, it's the lens you look through. It's that lens until you realize, okay, this is my lens, and that, why is that person reacting that way? That's their lens.
Yeah.
And so once and then it's unpacking that, like you said, it's not always ours. Like, it's my whole journey of like doing a lot of work with my parents, having a lot of conversation with them. And I know not everyone gets, their parents have passed away. They don't have a relationship like I have with my parents. But doing this work with my parents, having conversations with about it, understanding their childhood and what they learned, and then going, oh my goodness, I learned that too. I made that meaning. I can choose otherwise now. I can choose for my perception just change. I can choose for it to mean something different, and therefore I choose to react differently to it. Maybe this is why I've been crying so much, because I'm letting go of all these old patterns.
Right, and like you said, the patterns are not just our patterns; they are our parents' patterns. They are, my feeling is also ancestral, cultural,
yes. Society, community,
societal, community, and when we do something in a different way, there's also an adjustment period.
Yeah.
It's like, like our learning to navigate my emotions is it's going to be a lifelong process.
Oh, for sure.
It doesn't just kind of like, oh, there's an emotion and now I'm kind of figuring this out. It's kind of like, yeah, I think it gets subtler as time goes on, because the sensations in the body, and as you learn the language of the body, it's easier for you to tune in and understand what it's trying to tell you in a shorter space of time. So those sensations might be more subtle, and you might be like, immediately, oh, now I'm feeling anger. Whereas before, maybe you would get triggered and you would go into your anger and you would, fire off an email at somebody or whatever that upset you. Whereas maybe now you're saying, oh, I've got this email, and actually, you know what, right now I feel quite angry. I feel kind of triggered in this situation. And the feeling for me is not actually related to this situation. It's not this person that sent me this email. This is a very, very similar feeling to what happened when, my dad ignored me when I asked him to come and do something with me, or I wanted him to play and he told me to go away, this kind of thing. So when we talk about emotions, for me, these are echoes of the past. The things that didn't work out in our favor, the things that were unseen, unheard by our parents, predominantly, that were untended for, uncared for, trying to make themselves resolved in the present day, in our adult bodies, in our adult form, in our adult life. So I think it's really important to make that distinction between the two. It's like, this really, if you're really, really in the present moment, there's very little emotional reaction going on.
No, for sure.
It's this past it's the skeletons of the past that are pressing our buttons today, and actually paving the way for us to react in a specific way, in a pre-programmed way.
Yep. And again, this work, there's no one way to do this. There's no one path. There's no one way to do life. And no, some people use the power of now and being in that present moment, which I love. But I also feel, for me, it's almost a spiritual bypass. It's like, I'm not going to deal with those emotions. But in some ways it's like, no, they keep coming up. I can keep just coming back to the now, coming back to the now. But if it keeps coming up, for me at least, my journey has been like, no, let's express them. Let's get curious about them. And what, like you said, what's this pattern? Where did this come from? When did I first feel this? And that takes some practice. And sometimes it is about just practicing feeling them and connecting with your body and the sensations of them. And then, oh, I first felt this when I was 2. I first felt this when I was this age. I remember this happening.
Yeah.
And letting it, flow all out then, and letting your body finally feel that sense of relief. I was listening to an interview with Gay Hendricks talk about his story when he had his accident, and after that accident kind of had a sense of enlightenment and just cried and cried and cried and had all the sadness come out of him from his childhood. And how after he had this all this sadness come out, how all of a sudden he could pass when you go to renew your license, you have to pass at least in the United States. I can't say how it works in the UK where you're at, but you have to do a vision test. And all of a sudden he could pass it without glasses. He didn't need glasses anymore. Like, his sight cleared up after years of having glasses. And he really attributes that to the fact that he had so much sadness in the body from his childhood that he was never allowed to express, or he didn't give himself permission to express. And he finally let it go, and how just shifting that shifted his vision.
Yeah. And that, I agree with what you were saying before about the risk of bypassing emotions, coming back to the present moment, or, just change your vibration and come out of that, and don't dwell in the thoughts of anger or sadness. Just focus on the feeling of being happy or peace or whatever. Or, for me, that is kind of a distraction, because this emotional energy, which in the work that I do is so unexpressed and unresolved emotion manifests in the body. And whether that's in physical sensations or illness or sickness or whatever, it's within our energy field, and actually it's just asking to be resolved. That's why it hangs around, because it just wants to be expressed and resolved. This for me is emotional energy. It needs an outlet, and then it's done. And what do? We put the lid on, and we stuff it back down, and it's the whole, oh, I don't want to cry and get emotional. I don't want to show my feelings. Or I'm really angry with my boss, but I can't really say anything because I'm worried about losing my job. Or big boys don't cry. That's a really, really such damaging things we tell children that really, cut this emotion off and keep it within the body, right?
Yep.
Keep it within the body, and it builds and builds and builds. And we get more and more detached from that emotion until usually life has a way of either breaking us down so that we have to do something different, or my view is we slowly surely get more and more and more and more constricted, and more in pain and more uncomfortable.
Yep.
Sometimes we might even get to a point where it's we need to break out of that shell and start actually resolving some of back catalogue. And that's a lot of the work that I do, is resolving the back catalogue, really.
Yep. To
be able to be in the present moment, because where this emotional energy is coming from the past, it just wants to be expressed. And as you said, there are numerous different ways of working through that. But being in it and just allowing yourself to feel that emotion and breathing is going to move on.
Yep.
Just acknowledging it.
Yeah. And I think so many of us too have learned, I don't want to say it's acceptable, but in some ways acceptable to numb the pain. It depends on what you use to numb it with, but it's like, you still numb it instead of feeling and expressing it and resolving it.
Well, you know, there are numerous ways to numb emotion, right?
Tons of ways.
There might be I just have a glass of wine when I get home every night.
Mm-hmm.
Or there might be I have a bottle of wine when I get home every night.
Mm-hmm.
Or there might be, oh, well, you know, I just had a snack from the snack machine. Sugar, alcohol, drugs. I mean, sugar and alcohol, they're the kind of legal ones, right? They're the most socially acceptable ones. Drugs, that's a little bit more challenging. But, you know, all of these things are, as you say.
I was using running. I was using running as my numbing. And finally my body was like, made me stop running. I mean, I was injured for almost a year until I could deal with all the anger. And then all of a sudden I could run again without pain. I was using running as a numbing. So, I mean, yeah, there's so many things. And some people would say, well, running is a great thing. What's wrong with it? It is a great and wonderful thing. But how are you using it? And you're conscious around how you're using it. And a lot of people talk about that. Oh, when I'm feeling angry, I go to spin class and I swim hard and I get out for a ride or go for a heavy hike or go for a run. And it does feel good. You're feeling those endorphins. You're feeling your adrenals firing and giving you that euphoric, but you're not dealing with the emotion.
Yeah.
Until, like in my case, I got an injury that was all the way to connected with my liver meridian, which is related to anger. Until I could start to address that anger, my body was like, we're not running anymore. We don't care what you try.
Yeah. And the same for me when people end up on my door doing breathwork processes. Mm-hmm. It's breathing is a very, very simple and easy way of actually helping the body release. And that's, as you know this anyway from the work we've done together, but, you know, holding the breath is usually the primary way that people will suppress or repress emotion. So rather than say that thing, rather than get upset, rather than cry, we hold our breath. Mm-hmm. And the emotion passes, and we keep the tears in, and we've held it together. And then life carries on. Mm-hmm. My feeling is that emotional energy, my belief is this, that emotional energy gets stuck within the body, as you say. Mm-hmm. It's stuck here until we choose to do something about it and allow it to exist and allow it to flow through us.
Exactly.
And in that way, we can use our emotions as a navigation system of, this thing serves me, this thing doesn't. You know, what I kind of feel upset about this, or I kind of feel angry about this, or where are my boundaries being pushed? Where am I not getting my needs met? Rather than, I don't want to feel angry. I don't do anger. And that might be because you had a really abusive, angry father. And for you, it's not acceptable to feel anger because you felt that rage directed at you. So you'll be damned if you're going to become an angry person. You don't do anger. Right? So again, that's held in. I don't know if you've ever been around anybody that has this veneer of, you know, serenity and calm and friendliness. But underneath, you can actually sense on an energetic level the anger, mm-hmm. the unexpressed anger, or sadness, or fear, or whatever it is. And you kind of feel that vibe. There's something up here that I wanted to show you, actually. It's over here. And this is, I don't know if it's around the right way. It's probably around the wrong way. There you go.
No, the other way. At least the other way, yeah.
Oh, it turns it around. Cool.
Good vibes only.
Yeah, and this is a nice concept.
It is a great concept.
It's a great concept, but it's not real life.
No. I think what is great about that concept is when you get stuck in the emotion and you can't get out. So when you're in that state of like a depression, you know, and you just can't get out. And when I think about depression and my own journey with depression is I wasn't giving myself permission to feel my feelings. I was just stuck, and mostly in my head, just replaying. My body was just, versus just feeling and stepping into it. I mean, I felt like I had to turn and face the depression and look at it and just go right into it. And that, you know, and then it wasn't like, let me just be in the depression and try to have good vibes and just feel good and feel good and feel good and feel good. And I was just creating good energy within me, but I wasn't releasing the sadness. I wasn't releasing the anger. It was just also just staying in there and then giving myself permission to release the anger, to release the sadness. I started to move through it.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful, what is so beautiful about what's happening on this planet right now is there's so many great tools. So this course that I'm doing in terms of feeling your feelings or feeling your emotions is just one way. Just like, I mean, you and I both know we've tried all sorts of different things. I do breath work. I love it. I do Reiki. I love it. I do massage. I love it. I mean, there's so many, I do release writing. I do so many different tools out there, and it's trying it out. It's getting in that sandbox of life and just trying things on and allowing yourself to be vulnerable, allowing yourself to be brave and courageous and step into your emotions in this journey. And it's a beautiful thing to see this coming to light, to see more people waking up to this. And I know there's going to be, more coming, like more tools in the toolbox for people to learn how to move through, or the word that you use that I sometimes use as well is navigate through your emotions and really express them and move them out of the body so that you do feel more joy. You do feel more harmony and at ease instead of kind of dis-ease, which creates disease.
And I think that's what naturally happens, when we allow them to discharge and move through, or we express them, or however we choose to process that emotional energy, which, as you said, is a variety of different tools. And for me personally, breathwork has been one of the most profound, I guess, and fastest processes. But I'm still working with new things all the time. But this is my kind of go-to staple as a way of not having to verbalize or mentally regurgitate the past, or find the situation, or find the energy, or find the emotion, or the particular time in your life. This is breathwork is a process of really getting out of the head and into the body, and just allowing that emotional energy to move through and be processed, right? Mm-hmm. So when we allow some of that heavier energy to move through, like you say, we automatically gain access to the lighter states of being. Because where we cut the heavier end off, we also cut the lighter end off when we're numbed out in the middle. Mm-hmm. So if we can allow this free flow of what we would class as negative emotion, I'm just going to say heavy, when we allow this free flow at this end and some of this to dissipate, we also gain access to the higher level emotions, the lighter emotions, the joy, the peace, the love, and actually the deeper connection with ourselves. Because again, it's this emotional energy that's the blocker in the middle that prevents us really knowing and expressing who we are, because we've had to hold all of that in. So it's become really kind of confused and icky and all kind of like, like a big congealed ball within us as to what is us and what is the past. What is us and what is somebody else's emotion? What is ours? And, something on the outside. So it's very difficult, I think, for me anyway, personally, where all of this has been stored inside and kind of not in an ordered fashion either. It's kind of been stuffed in, and there's a bit hiding there, and there's a bit under the sofa, and behind the radiator. It's kind of like it's like an infinite number of things that you've kind of hidden away and tucked away for another day. it takes up space.
Yep.
And it's heavy.
Oh.
It's heavy to carry around. It's like having a knapsack. You know, how big is your knapsack? Well, how long is your life? How stressful was your, you know, your upbringing? How many relationships have you had? And you can just, the knapsack's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and maybe it's kind of like one of these, you know, it's a whole caravan behind you. And you wonder why you're kind of like really slow walking along the road. Well, because you're towing this whole bloody thing behind you. You haven't got time to really connect with yourself because you're too busy putting all your energy into carrying all this crap from the past around with you. The connection with self for me is, you know, is that lightness of being, is that peaceful place. It doesn't require effort. The effort is in maintaining this kind of the weight on the shoulders and the baggage. And when you're still trying to do that and still trying to put these emotions aside or ignore them or ignore your needs, then connecting and having a sense of inner peace is really, really difficult.
Again, I think that we try to have that inner peace without worrying about all these things that we're carrying with us by, you know, being present and meditating and doing yoga. And don't get me wrong, I do all these things. But giving ourselves the permission to start letting go of all that extra weight. And then you really feel presence. You start to really feel presence. It's like when you're in yoga and you're in pigeon pose. It's such a, you know, it's such a, not difficult, but it's, I mean, a difficult pose, but you really feel into that pose. For some people, it's really and almost painful because there's so much stored emotion and energy in the body, and you start to release. And as you become more connected with your body and you're in that pose, you start to, you almost memories just start coming out. At least in my experience, like all of a sudden a past memory or a feeling, and sometimes I'm crying and sometimes I'm angry, and it's just such a glorious pose. And it's just one. My niece last night was so great. She was listening to an audio of mine, and she goes, as I was listening to this audio, I imagine you were in happy baby pose, because it just felt like you were opening up, which it is. It's such an opening, especially of like the pelvis and that creative energy area of just opening up to your creativity, your joy and your light in that sense, because it also can open up the heart in a sense. So it's, I mean, you can use those tools for that, but sometimes people use them to numb and to try to, no, I just want to be present. And, you know me, I'm a meditator. I make meditations. But I often don't just be in the present moment. It's usually working through something.
Yeah.
That I guide you through. So
I think that can provide us with a bit of a break too, you know, coming out of this mind state and recognizing that from the thought, it's usually the thought that the emotion is generated from. So I think part of this journey about understanding and really learning about your emotions is understanding more the role that the mind takes in this process. Because it's not just a case that it's the physical sensation can actually be triggered, as you were saying earlier, by a thought. So, oh, I have a fear of dogs, for example. And I go out in the street and I see a dog. So my reaction is, there's a dog. My body goes into a whole fight or flight response, hormones released, everything else. You know, maybe I run away, maybe I stay there, maybe I freeze, whatever I do. Maybe I start sweating, maybe I start shaking, maybe I have a knot in my stomach and I feel anxious and I'm really scared. The dog hasn't come near me yet. The dog's at the end of the street. But my thought was, oh, there's a dog, and all of this cascade of physiological reactions from that thought, that observation and that thought. And the thought probably is, I'm in danger. When
currently in that moment, you're not.
Yeah. So this, yeah. So Exactly. You're not.
That's that question I always ask people. Is it that you're unsafe or you're just uncomfortable? Because you created a thought to make you feel uncomfortable. But you're safe. Right where you are, you're safe. Nothing is actually happening to you. You're just feeling uncomfortable because you're creating a story in your head around what could or could not happen. And your body's reacting to that story, to that past memory, etc. And you're being triggered. I also think as we do this work, for people that are really had some pretty severe trauma, doing it baby step by baby step, because going in deep, it just can make them freeze up and not want to, they don't want to feel that pain again. But slowly introducing them to connecting with their body, connecting with the feeling, and slowly releasing. It's like you wouldn't take this bottle here and just throw 10 things of Alka-Seltzer in it. It would just explode. You might put one in, let it fizz up, and then relax. And then put another one in, let it fizz up and relax. Come back to a state of calm. And teach people how to come back to a state of presence once they've just released a little bit. And start to feel safe again in their emotions. Because there's a lot of people that don't feel safe because of a trauma and a lot of us have had, some varying level of trauma in our lives. And what we made, going back to perception, what we made meaning to trauma. Like your parents getting divorced, you feel abandoned. That can be traumatic. And yet your dad leaving wasn't necessarily meaning he was abandoning you. He just wasn't going to be there every day to day, but you made meaning to that. And it was traumatic for you. So it's just, in some regards, especially in the work I do, I try to observe too, where are people at? And sometimes I don't have the skill set for it. And it's referring them to someone that has a skill set to deal with something that's, post-traumatic stress disorder, sexual trauma, et cetera, et cetera. But coming back, what I do support is coming back and just starting to connect with the body. Even just as simple as connecting with the breath, as you talk about, and really breathing and connecting and allowing the body to start to just slowly release energy without having to fully, like you talked about, you don't need to always go back to that past, go back to those memories, go back to that situation and feel all that pain again. You just got to release it from the body. And learning how to navigate that and what's going on and not being afraid of it. So just starting with the breath and connecting with your breath and connecting with the sensations your body's making without giving thought to it. Oh, I feel lightness in my heart. I feel tightness in my belly. That's it. That's all. And not giving meaning to it at that point, but just I'm connecting.
Yeah, I really like that.
There's a lot of
it's an observation,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to have a judgment. It doesn't have to have this kind of thought generated from it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what you're saying. It's like, this is what I'm feeling right now. This is the sensation that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
What does that feel like in the body? Is that comfortable? Is that uncomfortable? Mm-hmm. Is it light? Is it heavy? Does it have a color? Where is it?
Yep.
Does it move? Does it have a texture? Does it have... And I think there's... people have a lot of fear around emotions.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of fear around emotions. A lot of fear that... This is what I see, that expressing emotion, particularly sadness, anger, grief,
also
pain.
Other people's emotions. Like, how uncomfortable are we when someone cries? I mean, now because I do this work, I'm not uncomfortable, but how many times have I cried or been angry and someone's like, ooh, I'm uncomfortable with that. I don't know what to do when you're crying. And I have to say, just let me feel it and just be here and hold space. We're so uncomfortable with other people's feelings as well.
Well, going back to this lack of education around how do we deal with and handle emotions. We haven't really had necessarily great role models, growing up. Mm-hmm. We haven't had this information available to us in school. How to deal with conflict, how to deal with sadness, how to grieve. The standard line is, oh, well, You know, somebody's upset, somebody's sad. Okay, well, you'll get over it. Don't cry. You know, hand on the shoulder, the, you know, distraction, whatever it is. And unfortunately, we don't get taught. And also it leads us to disowning this emotion or ability to be emotional within us. Mm-hmm. So when we see somebody else upset, crying, sad, expressive, usually what happens is it triggers the same feeling in us. And we don't want to deal with that in us. So we don't know how to deal with it with somebody else. Mm-hmm. It's just, it starts triggering us. It starts bringing that
vulnerable.
Surface. It's vulnerable. And I think the fear that people have is with emotions is that they're going to get stuck there. Mm-hmm. You know, oh, no, I don't want this emotion. Coming back to what we were saying before, this emotion is not going to last very long. But it's our resistance to feeling the emotion that keeps it trapped. Yep. It's our resistance to actually feeling our experience in that moment that keeps the energy trapped. So every time it starts coming up, we push it back down. It comes up again, we push it back down. Whereas actually we let it out. And as you're saying, we don't have to let it all out. In breathwork, I kind of describe as we're like a fizzy, like a, what's the word? A fizzy soda, a bottle of soda, right? And that contains all of our life experience and it's carbonated. And what happens is life shakes up the bottle, right? And then we open the lid. And if we open the lid all in one go, then the chances are it's going to be a pretty dramatic, you know, we're going to get pretty soaked with and
soda.
Sticky.
Yep.
Right? With soda. Whereas breathwork and other techniques, you know, I like the fact that we're taking the lid off a little bit at a time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, teaching people to navigate this process in a gentle, loving way, rather than an explosive way. And that doesn't mean to say that some of these emotions aren't intense or overwhelming, because they can be. Mm-hmm. That's the reality of emotions. But I think a big part of that is for people to understand that feeling emotion is okay. And actually, you're not going to die.
No.
You know, feeling some pain or feeling some sadness or feeling some anger, because that's the other underlying feeling we have is, if I feel this, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be really hazardous to my continuing to live, or I'm going to get stuck there. So I'll be dead, or it's not safe.
Mm-hmm. And yet so many of us do just push it down, push it down, push it down, push it down, and then boom, like one little thing, and we explode. We feel so much blame and shame for it. You know, for how we explode. We make a huge mess of everything.
Right.
When we do explode. And not really realizing that we could do this in a different way. We can let it out as it comes, instead of just waiting for it to build up. Because eventually, even with that, you know, shaken bottle of soda, keeping the lid on, there's a point where the lid's just going to pop. The pressure's too much.
Right. And that can be your, you know, your marriage breakdown, your midlife crisis, that can be getting an illness or a sickness, or it can just be, you know, losing the plot and not being able to keep it in anymore. Yep. You know, I don't think anybody wants to be in that situation, but we leave this, sometimes we leave addressing this issue so long that the universe kind of forces our hand to do something about it.
Yeah, of course.
You know,
and then we have to be awake to see that, you know, because what do we normally do? Something happens like a disease, we go and use other substances to help manage that. And what we just need to do is just listen to ourselves and start to release these emotions, start to let them go in a way that's really healthy. And it does really feel good once you learn how to do it. It feels so amazing. Like for me now, I mean, I feel like I can cry anywhere. Like I'm to that point where I don't just need the safe space. I can be walking down the street. I can be getting on the metro. I can be leaving my building and the doormen are going to be there. And an emotion comes up. I just let it go. And again, it moves through me in no more than 90 seconds. I just If they want to ask questions,
Yeah.
they can ask questions. And if they don't have to, you know, it's so, oh, it's just so amazing just to let it go.
Well, it's just freeing, isn't it?
Yep.
It doesn't. I think the great thing is, in all of the work that I've done on myself over the years, is this recognition that things can change and they don't have to be how they've always been. And I find it really interesting when people say, "Well, I can't change. This is just how I am. This is how I deal with it. This is how I deal with the situation. This is my relationship." And in my experience, it gives me great hope that we really have such capacity to change and adapt and be flexible and change our complete outlook on life. You know, when we start doing the inner work and what does this feel like for me? What's happening in my experience? And what filters have I got that are maybe out of date or dirty or just a warped perception of the world? Actually, I can then do something about that. Once I start recognizing that actually this is my challenge and it's also my opportunity to change my glasses maybe, or to examine them and figure out where they don't quite fit with my version of reality, you know, the whole expectation hangover thing. So we have that choice. Nobody else can make that choice for us.
We have that choice.
Realizing that we have that choice is really, really powerful. And I think empowering. So once we start on the journey of understanding our emotions and start on the journey of understanding our body and what it's trying to tell us, it's actually really empowering and freeing, because we don't have to go somewhere else to get an interpretation. We don't have to keep, you know, trying to find answers, because ultimately we have all of the answers that we need ourselves. But where we have all this emotional energy in the way, again, we can't hear that. We can't tune into it. We can't find the peace that we need to be able to listen to that intuition voice, which, as I say, doesn't kind of shout, it whispers.
It totally whispers.
Right? And if the anger's in there and it's shouting, and there's the fear that's in the corner, you know, doing this, and how are we going to hear the truth? Because there's too much noise.
It's allowing things to first feel it, express it, allowing things to come, you know, to settle, and then really listen to yourself and hear your truth, your authentic self.
Yeah. Which is the difference between, you know, reaction and response as well. And for me, reaction is taking action or making a decision or having a thought on false information. You know, it's the anger button that gets pressed that we go into a loop. We act in a certain way. Whereas once we disconnect from that loop and we resolve the anger, actually we have an opportunity to view that situation in light of the truth and determine how we choose to respond, rather than reacting from an old pattern, which was on autopilot before. We can choose to take in the information, and then we can choose the way that we respond to that information based on more of a blank slate. Rather than this warped perception that we might have had before, we can actually respond, which might not be sending a nasty email back. It might be figuring out that actually it's not worth your time.
As you do this work, you might send the nasty email back and then realize, okay, I need to make some adjustments. You might react because that was the pattern that you lived off and operated on, and realizing and give that, okay, I recognize I do this. I'm going to give myself some grace, and I need to practice shifting to a new way of being. This is not like it shifts overnight either, this work. It is like realizing, because I will be the first to say I still react sometimes to my anger, but it's realizing I'm in that place. Okay, just feel it. And then what information is it giving to me? What expectation did I have? What's not working? What boundaries been broken? What agreement's been broken? And then addressing it from there. But there's still moments I'm like, boom.
Yeah. We're all works in progress, right? We're all human at the end of the day.
For sure. For
And
sure.
I think that's where I like the the opportunity really to be the observer of our
Mhm.
experience, and take a back seat, and like being the person in the back of the brain, just looking at all this information that's coming in, and the thoughts that are arising, and the reactions and responses that we're having, and the emotions, and just go, oh, that's interesting.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I'm feeling this. What's that trying to tell me? Or where does that come from? Where does that feel familiar? And the chances are it will feel familiar somewhere, right? But when you have
Exactly.
that level of almost taking yourself out of your experience and being a bit more subjective about reality in that given moment, the chances are you're going to see more of the patterns. And
Yep.
like you say, it might be actually that one of the reasons that you're so angry, that you have an issue with anger, is because, or you resent somebody, is because you've allowed them to overstep your boundaries for years.
Mm-hmm.
Because you haven't been able to respect your own boundaries, actually. You haven't been able to put something in place to protect yourself. So, but also, you don't speak up about it.
Yeah.
So
No, of course.
you let them do it. You don't want them to do it. You let them do it. You don't say anything, but then you feel resentful because you haven't stuck up for yourself, and you feel like they're encroaching
Mhm.
on your good nature.
Which is a condition that you created when you were younger.
Right.
That either you have a belief that you can't, speak up for yourself, you're not worthy enough, like something happened from your childhood for you to create that meaning, for you to create
Yeah.
that program to be that way.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't all, it's, there are moments where I'm like, I am stuck. I am trying to be my observer, but I'm not, I'm just in it. And
Yep.
that's where I need the support from others to show me, to help guide me, whether I use a coach, and I have two different coaches that I use, and I have a therapist on this journey of mine. And it's unbelievable because sometimes I am like, yeah, I'm stuck. I'm full on stuck. And I need support from others to help guide me or ask me the questions that I don't know why I cannot ask myself. And it may be the fact that I have fear and I don't want to revisit that, or I don't want to know, but I need someone to help me bring it to light so then I can really see it again.
Yeah, I think that's really, you've hit the nail on the head. Is
The same with the breath work. When
support.
I did the breath work, I mean, things that just came up, it's not something I could generally, not to say that I couldn't do it by myself, but when I did that breath work, especially that second session with you, with the group one, I mean, there were just stuff that I was like, wow, you know, through the space that you created in that work allowed me to bring up what I needed to address in that moment and to feel through it.
Yeah,
So,
because the only way out is through.
yeah.
It's not what everybody wants to hear, but the
No.
only way out is through. And sometimes it takes the feeling uncomfortable to feel the peace on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like no pain, no gain.
Yep. So we are like way over time.
Yeah.
It's been a
Should
great
we?
conversation, by the way.
Yeah, likewise.
And I'm going to stop the recording now. If you've made it this far in this video or audio, I just first of all want to thank you for coming all the way to the end of this. It was a long conversation with Philippa. It was a good conversation. We kind of at some points were just all over the place and repeating each other. But thank you so much. As you can see, I have a lot to learn with making these video conversations. I am filming this ending part hours later because I've just had a busy day, and I'm not using natural sunlight anymore. I'm just using the light in my room, hence why you see this light shining. We'll just call it angelic light shining on me. But the point of the conversation is the meat of it. It's about the feeling of your emotions, understanding what your emotions are, what your feelings are. What is it telling you? What do you need to do to release them? Why would you want to release them? What are you learning about connecting with yourself in this way? So that's what I really wanted to share in this conversation, and in the work I'm doing in the course called Feel Your Emotions. If you have questions about what we talked about, please feel free to ask either of us. If you want to just share what really resonated with you through this conversation, I'd love to hear about what really resonated with you, if there was something that was really helpful. Like, I love hearing that kind of stuff. So please, please, please send me your thoughts on this kind of stuff. If you want to join the course, we begin March 23rd, so there's still time to enroll. As I've said before, I'm only taking 25 people in the course just to make it intimate and really create a good, safe space where we can kind of dive deep into these information around your emotions and your feelings and start really feeling them. It's going to be vulnerable, but it's going to be so liberating as well. I also want to thank my friend Philippa. She has been this like gift that the universe gave me about 6 months ago when she was here in Brazil. And she's just this beautiful, beautiful energy in this world. And I just love having her in my life. I love that she brought Transformational Breath to my life and to my journey. So just thank you so much, Philippa, for doing this conversation with me, and as always, encouraging me to continue to do this work. It's just beautiful to see her and so many others starting to really show up and do more of this work. So thank you. That's all. It's late here in Brazil and I'm ready to go to bed. So wherever you are in the world, have an amazing day, an amazing week. And I hope again that you got a lot out of this conversation. Ciao, ciao. Beijos.